Hello, my name is Steve Egan. I'm the Vice President of the Albuquerque Historical Society, and we welcome you to our program for this month of October. Our featured speaker today is with me today, and she is Rosemary McNerney Winkler, who is author of a new book called Stories of Early Albuquerque, as told in Albuquerque Genealogical Society Quarterly. Rosemary grew up here in Albuquerque and always interested in family history. She listened to stories and quizzed parents, grandparents, grandaunts, aunts and uncles, first, second, third, fourth cousins, and siblings, always making notes. In 1995, Rosemary joined the Albuquerque Genealogical Society. She taught a class on publishing family history at the University of New Mexico Continuing Ed and volunteered at the Genealogy Center. After publishing several family histories and her dad's military history, she took the editor job for the Albuquerque Genealogical Society's quarterly publication in 2013. And during that time period, till recently, she wrote several family stories. And this started out as a fun project of a series for the quarterly, and then it became a rewarding experience for Rosemary as she compiled and edited them into this book, Stories of Early Albuquerque.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you for inviting me to your Albuquerque Historical Society meeting. AHS makes an important contribution to the community. Philosophers have said variations on those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. I'm here to talk about my book, Stories of Early Albuquerque. When I took over as editor of the quarterly in 2013, I had been volunteering at the Public Library Genealogy Center for several years. My job was to help library patrons new to genealogy get started. I also prepared publications of genealogical societies from all over the country for the shelves at the Genealogy Center. I noticed that librarian Lisa Kendrick noted on some publications, do not save. Others were coded and put out for patrons to use. I asked Lisa what makes a publication savable, and she told me if it's all about patting the backs of members and photos of themselves, it's not worth saving. On the other hand, if a publication has historical or other genealogical interest, such as hints about genealogical research, court records, DNA, writing up family history, genealogy software, or local information, those are savable. Right then, I decided to start Stories of Early Albuquerque for the quarterly. The cover photo is an 1891 wedding of Edmundi Ross, daughter of New Mexico Territorial Governor Edmund G. Ross, and William H. Cobb, prominent Albuquerque photographer. I will start with an incident. Oops. Oh, I'm showing you here the page numbers for the various names. This incident in Albuquerque, 1928, it involved Franchini, Del Fredi, Matucci, Dominici, and others. Seven Italian men dressed like gangsters and pretended to carry weapons. When they got word of real gangsters that were on the way on the train to settle in Albuquerque, they went to the railroad station and told the gangsters to keep going, that they weren't wanted here. The ruse worked. They kept going, and Albuquerque never had organized crime. Maybe we just have disorganized crime. All right, so next. Yeah, I'm going to tell a story as written by a prominent Albuquerque attorney, Bill Kelleher. He wrote this story of his grand uncle. The history of my grand uncle, Thomas Francis Kelleher, was preserved in part by his handwritten notes and in much more detail by two daughters, Margaret and Eugenia, who took shorthand notes of his recollections and later typed those notes. Later, his granddaughter, Dorothy Kelleher Valiant, summarized a portion of the typewritten recollections of her grandfather. We are all indebted to those who preserved these recollections and early day New Mexicans. Thomas F. Kelleher, the first member of our family to arrive in New Mexico, and later the first to settle in Albuquerque, was born in Rockland County, New York on October 1st, 1848. His parents were Irish immigrants who first lived in Western New York, and in March 1857 moved to a farm west of Lawrence, Kansas. To reach their Kansas farm, they traveled by railroad, steamboat, and horse-drawn wagon. On August 21st, 1863, Thomas experienced one of his most memorable days. On that date, William Quantrill and his band entered Lawrence from pro-slavery Missouri to kill and burn. Lawrence was then a hotbed of those who opposed slavery. Thomas, up early to attend early morning mass, as he was to be confirmed that day, fled into a nearby cornfield with his brother and survived the raid. After leaving the cornfield, he later returned to town with his younger brother, David Kelleher, my grandfather, that's Bill's grandfather. Where they viewed dead bodies, dead horses, and buildings still burning. In the spring of 1865, Thomas, then 16 years of age, hired on to accompany a wagon train hauling government freight from Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, on the Santa Fe Trail to Fort Union, territory of New Mexico. His job was bullwhacker, which required walking along 6 yoke of oxen, cracking a whip to keep the oxen moving, with his pay of $50 a month. On June 2nd, 1865, the wagon train consisting of 23 wagons left Fort Leavenworth. The wagon train, along with 3 or 4 other wagon trains, received limited U.S. Army escort to Fort Lyon, Colorado, as they crossed Indian country and were in constant danger of attack. Each night, the wagons circled for protection from the possibility of an Indian attack. Great herds of buffalo were seen as they traveled. On October 25th, the wagon train arrived at Fort Union, having traveled almost 5 months, averaging 12 to 15 miles a day. Thomas, following his return to Kansas, attended school for a year, and then, as was customary in those days, held a variety of jobs. During the winter of 1872-73, he was employed to buy buffalo hides. For several years thereafter, he worked as a buyer of hides, furs, and wool. The price for a buffalo hide from a bull is recorded as $3 to $3.50. For something less for a cow or yearling hide. He said his largest single purchase of buffalo hides was from a hunter when he paid $1,000. During his years as a buyer, he traveled by rail when possible, crossing over and upon the plains of Kansas, Indian Territory, Texas, and New Mexico. Many of the buffalo hides were sold for delivery in Russia. Although the notes do not record how the buffalo hides reached Russia, my childhood recollection is that buffalo hides were sent to St. Louis, loaded on a steamboat, headed for New Orleans, and then loaded on a sailing ship which went around the Horn to Russia. The notes also say the hides had to be treated with poison, and the only place buying hides in great quantities was Russia. Thomas came to Albuquerque in 1879, first traveling by rail to Las Vegas, New Mexico, and then by wagon to Albuquerque. The trip by wagon to Albuquerque from Las Vegas was made with 4 passengers. One of those was his brother, at a cost of $10 each. The trip took 5 days. They slept on the ground each night, arriving November 7th, 1879. Where was Albuquerque? I'm going to read from the notes. No one in the party had ever been to Albuquerque, and we thought it was located across the Rio Grande River, the other side of the sandhills, which we could see across the river. When we got close to the town, near where Huning's mill stood, we asked someone whom we met there, "Where is Albuquerque?" They told us it was right up there and pointed a little way. Most of the buildings being rather low, one could not see them until close. The cottonwood trees also hid them. Thomas and Dan Kelleher camped the first night in Albuquerque's Trimble Corral, located near present-day Old Town. The next day, he wrote a letter dated November 8th, 1879, the original of which, for many years, it has survived for many years. The letter being addressed to Miss Mary Scannell, Osage Mission, Kansas. Jesse Mary Scannell, his wife-to-be, arrived in Albuquerque by rail in 1880 on the first passenger train to arrive in Albuquerque. They were married May 10th in 1880 in the San Felipe Catholic Church. 6 children were born of the marriage, 2 of whom died as infants. Those who survived to adulthood were Thomas F. Kelleher Jr., Jesse D. Kelleher, Margaret Kelleher, and Eugenia Kelleher. Following his arrival in Albuquerque, Thomas went into the wool and hide business. However, the hides he bought were cattle and sheep, not buffalo. Although he initially opened his business just off Old Town Plaza, with the arrival of the railroad and the beginning of Newtown in 1881, he purchased a lot fronting on Railroad Avenue, now Central, for $265, and thereafter was in business at 408 Central Southwest, buying hides and wool and conducting a retail store, which he operated for many years. His son, Thomas F. Kelleher Jr., later joined him in the business. Years later, the business, then only retail store, selling leather goods, was moved to 105 Fifth Street Southwest. Thomas was active in Democratic politics, as was his son, Thomas F. Kelleher Jr., who at one time served as the Bernalillo County Commission and as a University of New Mexico regent. Jesse D. Kelleher was a prominent realtor, operating his own real estate office for many years. Margaret and Eugenia founded the Western School of Private Secretaries at 805 Tijeras Southwest, where for many years typing, shorthand, and accounting were taught. I think my mother took class there. Thomas F. Kelleher Sr. died in Albuquerque on January 6, 1930, at age 81, and is buried in the Santa Barbara Cemetery, as are Jesse Mary Scannell Kelleher, Margaret, and Eugenia. Thomas F. Kelleher Jr. and Jesse D. Kelleher are buried at Sunset Memorial Cemetery. Okay, next picture. Yeah, there is the handwritten story of that Thomas Kelleher wrote about the Lawrence invasion, Lawrence, Kansas. And he shows that because Tom always signed his name THOS Kelleher. So that's the Kelleher story. Okay, next picture. I'm going to read a little story about St. Anthony's Home for Boys. Is an orphanage a family? I believe so. I remember going as a young child in the late 1940s with my parents and family to St. Anthony Orphanage and Home for Boys. My parents thought it was important for me to see how others lived. They contributed to St. Anthony's, as did many Albuquerque residents, prominent businessmen, and civic and religious leaders of every denomination. It is an important part of Albuquerque history. St. Anthony's was a vital part of Albuquerque community from the time it was founded in 1913 by Sisters Gennaro and Evarista, members of the Order of St. Francis Seraph of Lafayette, Indiana. On arrival, they were met by Father Alfonso Mondaleri of Immaculate Conception Church and members of the community who hosted a welcome banquet for them at the Alvarado Hotel. They received their first orphans on February 24th, just 10 days after their arrival. The sisters accepted 50 acres as a gift from the fathers of old Albuquerque. The land was level and just east of the Rio Grande, which meant it could be irrigated. This was necessary as they planned to raise much of their own food The site was located at 1500 Indian School Road, west of and adjacent to the Albuquerque Indian School. The pressing need was recognized by the community, and the Sisters and Orphanage received continuing support. Ground was broken for the first new building in May 1913. The sisters and children lived in an existing adobe structure on the site during construction. Father Mandalari led fundraising and organizational events. He formed a high-powered committee of Albuquerque's mayor, the rabbi of Congregation Albert, and the Archbishop of Santa Fe, architect Joseph LaDriere, who contributed his services and designed the first building gratis for the orphanage. Next, yeah. Okay. The first building with accommodations for 165 children was completed on June 2nd, 1914. It was dedicated on October 25th of the same year. The main floor contained a chapel, offices, reception rooms, school rooms, and a girls' dormitory. The kitchen, playroom, and nurseries could be found in the rear of the building. The boys' dormitory, capable of housing up to 150 youths under age 14, occupied the third level. Observers at the time considered St. Anthony's a thoroughly modern building, practically fireproof, and all the more interesting for being made of adobe. Orphans arrived from throughout the state. The need for a school brought 3 additional sisters, and the first school opened August 20th, 1914, with 40 students attending. By the 1920s, the orphanage had 175 children in its care. Girls stayed only until the age of 5. Additions were made to the building, and a classroom dormitory with an auditorium was added by 1924. Other structures on the site were a laundry, boiler house, barn, sheds for farm equipment, and a septic tank. A new chapel with a rectory was completed in 1931. The sisters purchased 41 additional acres from the Jesuit fathers in the 1930s. Every boy old enough to work had a job about the house or farm. Livestock included 40 milk cows, 2 goats, about 100 rabbits, 900 hens, 70 turkeys, and 10 hogs. The boys worked in the dining room, laundry, bakery, chicken house, chapel, kitchen, school, yards, nursery, barn, boiler room, incinerator, library, sewing room, and elsewhere. Under the care of the sisters and boys, the land became beautiful and productive, with an orchard, large garden, poultry yards, swimming pool, baseball diamond, as well as alfalfa and grain fields. St. Anthony's continued to play an important role in the community. Summer classes for teachers affiliated with St. Bonaventure College in New York were held at St. Anthony's. In 1940, the program affiliated with the University of New Mexico. Local businesses donated new shoes and bags of candy for each child, and sand and candles for luminaries every Christmas. A golden Guernsey bowl from a dairyman, dental service, and even an anonymous $10 for every child to attend the state fair. Prominent businessmen served on the board of directors, including the Thomas Kelleher we just read about. He was on the board of directors. Occasionally, celebrities came to St. Anthony's. Roy Rogers and Dale Evans visited and let children sit on trigger. Senator Robert Kennedy came through Albuquerque on the campaign trail in 1968. See the photo from the newspaper that's showing. He stopped and had lunch with the orphans. The Harlem Globetrotters gave a free exhibition in the old gym. In September 1949, a much publicized Farm in a Day event brought community support, including many skilled carpenters, engineers, electricians, plumbers, all volunteers, with tools, machinery, and materials to remodel and repair buildings, fill holes, plant trees, level fields. They worked from dawn to dusk to complete the tasks. In 1954, the city of Albuquerque requested and received 11 acres from St. Anthony's to extend 12th Street through its property. Additional buildings were added, but by 1965, the farm and dairy operations proved incompatible with the growing urban development, and the sisters auctioned off the livestock. A new convent administration building built in 1966 proved to be the final building project at the orphanage. Richard Griffiths, a St. Anthony's student in the 1960s, talks of kind but tough nuns who were trained not to become emotionally attached to the boys. They were teachers, den mothers, and scoutmasters. They took the boys on field trips to places like Navajo Reservation, Zuni Pueblo, El Morro National Monument, and the city of Socorro, home of the New Mexico Institute of Mining and Technology. They also toured Kirtland Air Force Base, trips to the State Theater downtown to see Disney movies, a memorable concert at Tingley Coliseum on the state fairgrounds, where they saw the Supremes, and trips to Woolworth to buy shoes and satchels were part of their lives. The boys learned table and social manners and string and brass instruments to play in the orchestra. They also learned how to fight, as there was a pecking order among the boys and a fight every day. The highlight of Richard's time there was on the day that he shook the hand of Robert Kennedy when he visited St. Anthony's in March 1968. Kennedy was assassinated 2 months later. Life there was regimented for residents, and each boy had daily chores, working hard in school and after school. They usually stayed through 8th grade. Richard and his two brothers, Warren and Carlton, attended many Catholic services, including daily mass, stations of the cross, litanies, and novenas. They were not orphans, but their single working mother did not want latchkey kids home by themselves every day. On completion of 6th grade in 1970, Richard was enrolled in Kennedy Junior High School in Albuquerque. Warren and Carlton left when St. Anthony's closed in 1971. Today, Richard is an industrial maintenance technician in Tulsa. Warren is a retired colonel from the Oklahoma Army National Guard, and Carlton is a successful business owner in the Dallas area. They are grateful for the excellent education they received at St. Anthony's. St. Anthony's served more than 5,000 children through the years. Rising costs, declining numbers of children, and drastic changes in childcare concepts finally rendered the orphanage impractical. It all ended in 1971. The sisters sold the property to the U.S. Department of Labor. It's the next picture. Okay.
Okay, here we go.
We're going to do LaDriere. Oh, here's just a brief synopsis of the Joseph LaDriere story. This photograph is courtesy of his grandson, and he is the one with the hat on, and that's his son with him there at their drafting table. Born Telesphore Flamand because his family was original from Flanders in France, Joseph LaDriere changed his name back to the family name. He left Canada and his family for Michigan, where he received architectural training. After that, he lived in Helena, Montana, where he met his wife, also French Canadian, and their daughter was born, Later, the family lived in Chicago, where their 3 sons were born. The family arrived in Albuquerque in 1900. He designed many buildings. That's the St. Anthony Orphanage building that he designed. And this building, which is still on the corner of 5th and Central. And that is the gas and electric building. And he also designed the first telephone building here. which is now the home of the Telephone Museum at 104th Street North, 110 4th Street Northwest. If you haven't seen that telephone museum, it's great. He was community-minded and donated his design for St. Anthony's. He died suddenly of a heart attack in 1917. I'll do a short story on Lovelace. The name has been in the news a lot. The story is in the book, the complete story. Dr. William R. Lovelace arrived in New Mexico in 1906, seeking the cure for consumption. He was a country doctor for several years and settled in Albuquerque in 1913. He was lifelong friends with the Mayo brothers, who created the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. Lovelace envisioned a clinic in Albuquerque on the Mayo model. He set about making that a reality, working with his doctor brother-in-law, who was also seeking a cure from consumption when he came here. His nephew, Dr. Randy Lovelace, followed in his footsteps, became a medical doctor, and joined the effort. Tests for the first astronauts were done at the Lovelace Medical Center in 1958. What happened? Why did this not succeed? You have to read the story in the book. Next. Oh, that's the Lovelace building in the 1950s, what it, original building. You can still see part of that. Yeah, next. Stam, a brief synopsis. The full story is in the book. Martin P. Stam, a Kansas farmer of Swiss origins, was married to Naomi Jenny, a school teacher. When their farm failed in 1880, Martin sold it and purchased a trainload car of butter. He took it to the rails ends, Albuquerque, and sold it. He started a wholesale produce business. Naomi packed up their two small children and arrived a year later. The business was successful, and Martin was instrumental in many Albuquerque improvements. Their son Roy and his wife Elizabeth Baldridge were parents to three sons. She came from the Baldridge Lumber Company family. Their youngest of the three sons, Robert, went into construction, eventually owning Bradbury Stam Construction. So, show picture. That's their son, Roy. He wrote a book too, called For Me the Son. Oh, I didn't do a story on the, forgot. Well, anyway, their story is real fascinating. They lived in Morelos, and the wife was a picture bride. Yeah, the Ong family. I thought I had gotten them all, but I guess not. Maybe on the other side. Wing Ong's relatives owned Fremont Grocery in Albuquerque, and he came to work for them in 1919. In 1929, he traveled to China to marry his picture bride, Wong Lin, and brought her back. They lived in Morelos, and she pawned her wedding trousseau to open a small grocery in the neighborhood and help support the family. Neither one of them ever saw their family again in China. He worked in various restaurants and eventually started his own New Chinatown on East Central. Together, they successfully educated their 9 children. Prominent photographer Kim Ju is their grandson. The story is by Kim Ong, one of their sons. Reynolds. Brothers Joshua and Jefferson, this is a photograph of Joshua Reynolds, joined the Union Army from Ohio and participated in many Civil War battles. After they learned banking and came to New Mexico in about 1876 with banking experience, first settling in Las Vegas, and then started an Albuquerque bank in 1878 at Second and Gold. In 1896, the family donated the land for the original Albuquerque Library at Central and Edith. The bank went down in 1929, but was reopened in 1933. It's a very interesting story, and it was written by Joshua Sims, descendant of the family. Collins. These are out of order, I guess. Okay, I can do, oh, this is McGinnis. That's a photograph of William McGinnis. He was born in 1837 in Dublin and was in New York by 1857. He joined the U.S. Army in 1858, traveled and learned Spanish. He joined the Union Volunteer Cavalry and was in New Mexico in 1862 during the Civil War battles of Apache Canyon and Glorieta Pass. After the war, he purchased a press in Kansas City or St. Louis and had it hauled to Albuquerque and started a Spanish-English newspaper here in Albuquerque. He married a local Hispanic girl, Lenore Cerna, thus combining the cultures, which he always thought was very important. Some of his descendants still live in the area. That's Collins. Okay, the last little blurb on one of the stories. John Collins, born into slavery, was a Buffalo soldier who came to New Mexico Territory with the Army in the 1880s to help build the railroads. He had previously worked on ships and served as mail carrier with the U.S. Cavalry. His Army regiment worked at Fort Bayard, and he sent for his wife, Melissa. He was on the team of engineers that changed the course of the river in Albuquerque and settled here. He started several successful businesses. He and Melissa were active in the Mount Olive Baptist Church. Great-granddaughter Brenda Dabney wrote this story for me. I think that's all.
All right, so we're back now, and you want to mention where we can get the book?
Oh, yeah.
Let's go back one more.
To purchase stories in Albuquerque, the 4 bookstores that have it are Organic Books in Nob Hill, Treasure House in Old Town, the Albuquerque Museum Gift Shop, and Page One on Eubank. If you don't live in Albuquerque, you can order online at bookshop.org shop organic books, or one of the other ones from this bookshop.org.
Okay, so that's the summary that we're presenting of the book. Are there any questions? We'll have a question and answer session now.
Let's see, the question is from Janet Sayers about the Kelleher Valiant. Was that the Valiant Printing Company Valiant? And the answer is yes. It was the Valiant Printing Company family. And Janet Sayers, another question. We always point out the gas and electric building and telephone building as part of our downtown walking tour. That's excellent. Yeah, I didn't know if anybody knew these buildings were there. I had never heard of architect LaDriere. Could you provide more information about LaDriere? Well, his complete story is in the book, and that's pretty much everything I had on him. Let's see, Janet Sayers again. Could you go back and mention the group of Italian men? I've been told there was much intermarriage. Could you comment on this? Oh, yes, the Italians were, they were intermarried with each other. I mean, they were, where's that picture? It's towards the end. Oh, yeah, here, this story.
Okay, you can read.
If I can read it.
Or do you want to read this one?
Oh, yeah, if I can.
I'll bring that up and then you can
Okay.
read on the next pages there.
Well, the whole thing is right here.
All right, okay.
Okay, so I can give you the names of all the men as far as they had it in this picture. I can't read his first name. Modesto. It's too tiny. Give him a magnifying glass. Modesto del, I can't read his name. Never heard of. No. Anyway, Peter Vici, second from the left. Joe Del Frati with a cap on, well, they all have a cap with the more shiny coat. That's Joe Del Frati. He was related. Yeah, they're all related to each other pretty much. Frank Petroni. And they don't have the first name of this Barasante. And then our Amadeo Matucci. Amadeo Matucci. He was that was the shoe family. And then, of course, Chopo Domenici, who was announced probably the father of Senator Domenici. So did I answer that question?
Asking again how you got involved in next question. How did you get involved in genealogy?
Well, I was always listening to the stories. Of course, I came from an Irish family and they're always telling stories. And I got real interested in that. And then I all started asking questions of all my cousins and aunts and uncles and grandparents. And then I got into, I got more into it. I found third and fourth cousins and asked them about it. And then, I don't know, I was just always interested. And it's been a lot of fun for me. And I've been very successful because I started early in the 1970s asking questions of everybody I could think of in the family, including first cousins, So I hope that answers your question, Janet. Could you say more about LaDriere now? What else would you like to know? LaDriere, where are you? Find it. He was very interesting, page 112.
Page 112, yeah, or 115, yeah.
Yeah. He loved automobiles and also he was known for a land speed record. He had several patents, including railroad switch, a specialized ladder, external armors for pneumatic tires. He was also an Oldsmobile distributor. Being politically active, he once served as treasurer for New Mexico Democratic Party. He enjoyed fishing, hunting, and at least once played shortstop in the local baseball game. So he was busy. He designed the Savoy Hotel, which was across the street from the railroad tracks. It was a very special, but it's gone now. It was a very special building. His oldest son, Arthur, was a carpenter and electrician. And that's what they say about the building at 5th and Central was electrically lit. And it was the first one electrically lit on Route 66. That's what I heard about that building. You probably already know about it and the picture of it. But
next page, on
next page.
114.
Oh yeah, he also did buildings for the University of New Mexico, the chemistry building, first chemistry building. And when construction began in early 1917, he started as a supervisor architect at $60 per month. He called a neighbor and said, "Help, I'm sick." And the neighbor came over and rushed to his house and called the doctor, but he died of a heart attack before the doctor could get there. And Mrs. LaDriere, his wife, was in Santa Fe with her brother, the governor. Otero was her name. And he was the governor and had died 2 days earlier when she received word of her husband's death. He's buried at Mount Calvary Cemetery in Albuquerque. After his death, his son Arthur supervised construction of St. Mary's Hospital in Las Vegas and the UNM chemistry building. So his sons also were interested in flying. And go ahead. Do we have another question?
Debbie's asked about
McNerney family. Yes, they came from Glenn, a small town on the Shannon. And I've met relatives there. My dad had known his generation of that family. And so I went over there and I met my fourth cousin, and they're just all thrilled when they see Yanks looking for their roots. And so the family came over one at a time in the beginning, their oldest daughter, and first, because she had a job as a nanny in New York, in Geneva, New York. So the whole family came over one at a time, and they worked in Geneva on the canal. They did not build it because the Erie Canal was already built, but they were barge operators, and then they left and spread across the country. A lot of McNerney's, they went to Zanesville, Ohio, where one settled, and then they went to Kansas, where another one settled. Horton, Kansas, a small town. One sister married and a Teamster, and he lived in Pittsburgh, Kansas. And then the last three children in that family, there were 8 children. Oh, well, the 3 went to Seattle and lived there for the rest of their lives. And then my ancestors settled in Kansas City, Missouri, and worked and as surveyors. They were surveyors, and they followed the railroad. They did surveying across the country, and that's why they were in the various towns surveying for the railroads. And so they settled in different places. They're real interesting. My grandfather had a saloon. They called it a working man's club in Kansas City, and until Prohibition. And this is my McNerney grandfather. And I have a great photograph of him too. And I have done a family history on them. And
What about your father and your brothers?
My father came to Albuquerque. Actually, part of his story when he came to Albuquerque is in here under Tishhauser Woodward, because that's my grandparents, the Tishhauser Woodwards. And I did a little story about my own dad. He came here as a surveyor before the war, and he was surveying Chaco Canyon when that big chunk fell on that big kiva there. And my mother was working in Farmington, and that's where they met. She worked for one of the gas companies. And so then he joined the military, like most people did, if he could, although he was beyond the age. And in 1942, he was 27 or 28, and they had a baby, but he wanted to join like everybody did at that time. And so my mother came back to Albuquerque, and she heard the atomic bomb trial from Albuquerque in July 1945. And anyway, he was on the way to the Philippines when the bombs were dropped in Japan. And it took, because he was an officer, he was a 90-day wonder, and the officers came home last. Non-commissioned officers and the enlisted came home first. So he didn't get home for almost another year. And so let's see, what brought your family to Albuquerque? Chaco Canyon. And then my mother's family was here. Let's see, Terry Christensen, what happened to the girls at St. Anthony's when they left? That's a good question. They probably put them in convents where nuns would raise them. They didn't have to be nuns or anything, but they were probably sent to relatives or to convents. I hope that answers that question.
And then Janet Sayers asked, did tuberculosis bring LaDriere to Albuquerque?
LaDriere. I don't think so. He's on page 112. I don't think it did. Well, LaDriere was real interesting, I have to agree, but I don't think anybody in the family was a tubercular.
So probably not then. Okay.
Probably not.
All right. So Terry Christensen asked, your book isn't at Bookworks on Rio Grande Boulevard Northwest? And the answer is no, unfortunately, it is not.
That's right. It isn't. I contacted them, but they never got back to me. I can try again because I have to go down in the North Valley, and maybe I'll drop in there to find out if they want them. So
And of course, you talked about your father, but didn't say more. So Janet Sayers is asking, is McNerney Avenue in the Northeast Heights named for your family?
Yes. When my father worked for Mossman Gladden from 1953 until he retired, and this whole section where I am right now on McNerney Street is named after people who worked, the most important people who worked for Mossman Gladden.
This is the Stardust Skies Park neighborhood.
Yes, Stardust Skies, right.
And, and you could also mention about your brothers. You have what they've accomplished growing up in Albuquerque and what they're doing now.
Well, I have one brother who is, his name is Jerry McNerney, and he is a congressman from California, a U.S. congressman from California. And he went to school here at Fatima, like I did. And then he went to military school in Kansas and with his twin brother, John. And then he got an appointment to West Point and on his own and went there, but he decided military wasn't for him. And so he got out and he came back to Albuquerque and he graduated from UNM with a PhD in mathematics. And he's also, his big project has always been wind energy. He's into wind energy a lot and lives in Northern California where they have wind farms. My other brother, John, lives here. Well, he lives in Placitas, and he, is married. And well, both of them are married and has a family, and he's retired, and he has degrees in food and nutrition and counseling. So, let's see. Janet Sayers, that would be a fascinating story about Mossman Gladden. Yes, it's I recognize all the names. Like when I drive through here, of course, you'll recognize Gladden and Caribou, and what are some of the other names around here? They're names for people I knew that worked for Mossman Gladden when my father did.
So if you look up the books that about street names here in Albuquerque, you can find out more about some of those.
That's right, yes. Any other questions? Did we answer everything?
So if we don't see any more questions, we'll say goodbye and thank you to everyone for joining us here with the Albuquerque Historical Society.
Somebody says, wait.
We may get another question here.
Wait. So, yeah, there is a lot of, there's two books I've come across that have the Mossman story with the names of the streets. Yes, I do. I'm looking back over the questions. I do need to go to Bookworks.
Well, once again, this is what the book looks like if you go to one of the stores we mentioned earlier, and where you can buy a copy of it.
Let's see, Janet Sayers is asking you. That would make
a great Mossman Gladden's, I guess, story. Could you find descendants? So
I could ask around and think about it. See if anybody in my family knows. I don't know of any of the descendants. I don't, although I knew them.
And Catherine Baker Seidel says, thank you. Well, you're welcome. We're glad to put this presentation on for everybody this afternoon.
Yes, thank you for participating and asking great questions and for being here and for listening. And I hope you know, as much information as I had on the families, I put them in the book. So, yeah, if there's any other questions, otherwise. Yeah.
Once again, this is what the book looks like.
I didn't do Snow here. The question, Janet Sayers, I would like to hear more about Snow and Hoffman. I tried to find out about Hoffman, but the family disappeared and he died young or something. Snow, I don't remember, but I did do Bellama, and that story is in the book. Bellama was here fairly early as a child with his family. And so, his story is real interesting. Karen Briscoe Morgan says, thank you, and thank you too. Trudy Merriman, thank you. This is very interesting. I always thought history was interesting. So thank you. Anyone else?
Okay, well, since there don't appear to be any other questions, we'll say goodbye to everybody now. And everyone have a wonderful day. And thanks again for viewing this program of the Albuquerque Historical Society.
Yes, thank you.